When I was a senior in college, I ran my first D&D campaign. It lasted approximately 10 to 12 sessions with 6 player characters. And if you asked any of my players about that campaign, I doubt they'd be able to remember a single detail. It's not that I didn't have any good ideas. In fact, I still think some of the concepts in that campaign were pretty cool. I had a talking basilisk, the giant snake kind, not the 6-legged lizard kind from the monster manual, that had been blinded years before. I had an ancient coven of immortal wizards of different races, including a halfling wizard who was just a talking severed head in a box. I had a city that had been overrun by thieves and cutthroats and renamed to Bandit City. I hadn't seen Mad Max yet, but in hindsight, it was basically Bartertown from Beyond Thunderdome. I had a dwarven civilization torn apart by natural disasters and civil war. I had an army of undead soldiers who would follow the orders of whoever held a magic scimitar. And I had a great big bad guy who was trying to manipulate the heroes into thinking they were doing the right thing. In the hands of a more competent DM, these details might have worked really well and could have turned into a very memorable and cool campaign. But I made every mistake you can make when you're starting out. None of my NPCs were distinctive or memorable. My combats were generic and uninteresting. My world was richly developed and detailed, and my story was thin and unoriginal. But worst of all, the cardinal sin of role-playing games is that the actions of my players had practically no bearing at all on the story I had laid out for them. And on the rare occasions when I would allow for input, I didn't listen to what my players wanted. My notes read more like a bad module than anything else. Very detailed in any possible choice the players could make, unless it was a choice I wasn't making for them. That basilisk I mentioned, he was a source of exposition. He told our players that a previous king had blinded him and that one of the PCs was his descendant. And I gave that story hook to one of the players who did not want it. She was not at all interested in playing the heir to some ancient dynasty. That just wasn't how she saw her character. And if I'd talked to her and either asked her straight up if she'd be open to that idea, or more abstractly asked what she wanted from the game, I could have been able to adjust that story so that she was more satisfied. Plot twists are fine. In fact, they're great. But forcing your plot into the backstory of a PC who is not interested, especially if they're not even as interested in the role-playing pillar of the game as you are, it's not cool, and it's not fun. The whole adventure became about setting up presentations for these cool ideas I had. The land had recently been ravaged by natural disasters, so I had this idea that hundreds of people would just start traveling together. Just these herds of mismatched, recently nomadic survivors. Hundreds of refugees, everybody carrying their possessions on their back. They had a complex system for signaling and sending messages through the herd to stop, to rest, to be alert, to sneak, to request someone come from further back in the pack. In the right campaign, that could be a great moment. The players can spend some time in the crowd and get to know people. Maybe they can get some relevant news about what's going on in other parts of the world that these survivors hail from, as these herds basically circulate rumors across the land. But all they did was show up, deliver some exposition, point the players towards the next location, and move on. A few times I did offer players choices, but they were so clearly inconsequential. They had a choice of moving through an area that was connected to the Feywild or through the ruins of a haunted city. But I didn't give them a choice of where they were trying to get to. The story hinged on them getting through one of those two places to get to the other side to get back to my story. But they just weren't invested in that. I just forced them along and kept pushing them into situations that they were not interested in. To their credit, my players did not complain. They didn't rebel against the story. They didn't go on a murder spree to mess with me. They didn't do any of the dozens of other examples I've heard of from other gaming groups online where people are in the similar situation and the players get frustrated. My friends knew that I was a first-time DM, and I think they just wanted to be supportive. But boy, even I don't remember the finale of the campaign. I mean, I remember the broad strokes. I remember there was a battle happening around them, like a war. And in the middle of the battlefield, they had to fight this warrior possessed by a dark god, I think. But man, it wasn't interesting and it sure wasn't good. And over the course of the semester, I could tell from my players, just from having played with them for a few years at that point, that they were not having a lot of fun. They weren't connecting to the story. The main story involved them collecting these items that had been used to seal away this ancient evil, which was imprisoned but still influencing and affecting the story from within its prison. And when I ran my next campaign, years later for a completely different set of players, I used pretty much the same format. But that time around, I had actually learned my lessons and I did a much more serviceable job, for the most part. In the aftermath of that first campaign, I was fairly discouraged. I wanted to run another game at some point, but I wasn't exactly feeling confident in my abilities. I had my shot, and I'd kind of blown it, at least with that group, and it set me back a little bit. But a few years later, almost 10 years ago at this point, I told some people at work about D&D, and I managed to get them together for a game. And I ended up running a campaign that lasted for about 2 years. Although we also only had about 12 sessions, it's a lot harder to get a consistent game going when you're out of school. And in a lot of ways, that campaign was the one where my career as a DM was really born. My first campaign, the one I tried in college, was pretty much the same as everyone's first attempt at doing anything creative. I failed because I didn't know what I was doing. I focused on all the wrong things, and things that seemed completely obvious to me now eluded me. But the campaign that I started in 2013, which, trust me, still had its fair share of bumpy moments, was when I figured out what kind of DM I wanted to be. And even now, 9 years later, having run multiple games for multiple groups at a time, I'm still learning something new every session. But I also know that I'm better at being a dungeon master now. I can keep my players engaged and reward their choices in just about every session. And honestly, I don't think I did that even once in my original campaign. So while I can still sometimes be fairly critical about the parts of my games that I don't feel are as strong as I'd like them to be, and I will certainly do many more videos about that topic in the future, I can also look back at my first campaign and learn from the things that I got wrong. But that's just me. What are some of the mistakes that you've made while running your games? What are some things that you look back on with regret, especially now that you have more experience under your belt? For me, honestly, most of the moments from that entire campaign are a mistake for some reason or another. But wow, forcing the fighter to be the last scion of some dynasty that she was just super not interested in, that's probably still the lowest moment of that campaign for me. But what about you? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more videos like it, hit the subscribe button, and if you'd like to know the moment they come out, hit the bell icon. I post new videos about D&D every Monday and Thursday. And if you want to hang out and talk about more D&D stuff, we have a Discord channel that a bunch of members of this community are a part of. It is a really wonderful group of people, a really lovely community, and I think you'd have a lot of fun there, so come check it out. And if you want to support this channel and help make these videos as good as they can be, then I have a Patreon. The link for that is in the description below. At any dollar amount, it is a huge help for this channel, but also, you get some pretty cool rewards for only $3 a month. I think it's worth it. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, play fair and have fun.